I asked you to think about the conflict, the fight that's taking place between Congress and the President, and asked you to give me your opinion, supported by facts, as to whether that fight was beneficial or good for the African Americans or not. Okay? And that's all I said. And I've gotten a variety of different papers, and a variety of different of you are all over the place with regards to it, because I don't think that you understood the question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to explain it to you and see if we can do better. Okay. Now, I'm going to teach you a new word, and the word is dynamic. Dynamic. Dynamic, or a dynamic relationship, is a relationship that has many things that impact it. For example, Andy Sordo, he has a band. His relationship with his band friends is completely different than his relationship with some of you. The dynamics of that relationship is different. Why? He probably talks to them about music, about what they're going to do, the instruments that they play. While with you, he talks about other stuff. So the dynamics of the relationship is different.
Middle school teachers, may I have your attention, please? The Central Park has been left a little discombobulated, so if you could send one student from each homeroom to please clean up the Central Park, and tomorrow I'm going to start monitoring, and if not, we may not have to be able to have lunch outside anymore. But I need one student from each homeroom to go help clean up. Thank you.
Now, I taught you dynamics. I will look at Webster's dictionary to find out what discombobulated means, because I think that that's a made-up word.
It is.
I know it is. Now, so, let me try to explain the dynamics of the relationship between the President, Congress, and African Americans. Now, before I do that, I want you to look at me.
It's an actual word.
Okay, I want you to look at me. And there's a lesson in the relationships and what's happening during this period of time. As you may remember, John Wilkes Booth kills Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth kills Lincoln thinking it's a good thing for the South. It's great, I hate him, he was the leader of the nation that defeated my nation, the South, and therefore I am killing him. John Wilkes Booth kills Lincoln partially because there is hatred in what he's doing. There's very little thinking through that plot. Let me tell you why. If John Wilkes Booth had thought through that plot, he would have realized a couple of things. Number one, you kill Lincoln and you kill the South's opportunity to reunite with the North in the easiest way. You may remember that Lincoln's plan, out of the 3 plans that were suggested, even Johnson's was the easiest. 10% of the population had to swear an oath, and they had to admit that the 13th Amendment was legal, that all slaves were free. That's it. All of the plans basically had the same requirement, except the percentage of people that had to swear allegiance was greater. Lincoln's was the easiest. Why? Lincoln has just fought a war. He wanted to get back to normal as quickly as possible. That was his motivation. When John Wilkes Booth kills him, intending for the best for the South, does he cause a good thing for the South? No, he causes completely the opposite. Now, let's think about what happens. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Any Cuban dancers?
Well, I dance Cuban.
Hobby.
Well, hello. Well, we need guys, so. Well, actually not, because we're doing great with Javier.
Oh, okay.
Rehearsals, extra rehearsals, if you can. He was
Right.
so good, he was awesome.
He is
Well,
awesome. And also,
insanely good with his
Yeah,
wife.
he is, that's for sure.
Awesome.
alright, so, he's awesome. Alright. So, okay, let me go back. So, sometimes the lesson that you learn there is a simple one. Sometimes, when you have an opponent, whatever it is, it's a sport, it's whatever, whenever you have an opponent, do not guide yourself by emotion and hatred. Because oftentimes, that emotion and that hatred is going to come back to hurt you. And in this case, it does to the South. Okay? But, just a second, that's in the beginning. But now what happens? Now we're entering the relationship between Johnson and Congress. Let me try to set the stage of that relationship. Johnson is from the South. I didn't make a mistake. Let me try to explain. Johnson really comes from a border state. Border states were southern states. Let me say that again. Border states were southern states. What were they?
Southern states.
That had stayed loyal to the Union. But they had everything in common with the South. In the border states, they had slavery. In the border states, they had, instead of factories, they had agriculture in their main industry. Now, the border states received a benefit during the war. During the war, when Lincoln signs his famous Emancipation Proclamation, you remember that?
Yes.
In it, he frees the slaves where? In the South, but not in the border states. So the border states had slaves all the way until the passage of the 13th Amendment. So they had slaves way after Lincoln had freed the slaves in the South. But now, they have to give up slavery because the 13th Amendment comes into effect. But yet, Johnson is still from the South. He grew up among slavery. He grew up, and by the way, to be president of the United States, you have to be rich. You have to have money. It's true. Do you think that Obama, before he became president, was poor?
Yeah.
No, he wasn't poor. He wasn't poor at all. No one that becomes president is poor. Why? Because, first of all, to run for president, you got to take an entire year to campaign, to fly, so it's a non-paying job until you become president. So they don't. If you campaign and you raise the funds and people donate, a little bit of that is, but oftentimes the people that run for president are rich. And so far, the people that we've had as presidents are rich. Johnson was rich. Stop. In the South, the rich people had plantations. In the South, the rich people owned slaves. So this is the culture. These are his friends. These are the people that he knows. Now he's the president of the United States. Why? Because John Wilkes Booth makes a big mistake for the South. He kills Lincoln. And now Johnson is the president. Now, a couple of things. Lincoln's plan, Congress didn't like it. But Lincoln was the guy that won the Civil War. Lincoln had just won a major presidential election. Lincoln was very popular because he had taken the nation through this very difficult time and held it together and won at the end. So Congress would have stood a very poor chance opposing Lincoln. If Lincoln really wanted the 10% plan, it probably would have taken place because he was more popular than Congress. But now it's not Lincoln the president, it's Johnson the president. Johnson doesn't have that popularity. He's from the South. Those people have slaves. We fought against a lot of them. Our kids died. Our relatives died. Our friends died. We sacrificed, So Johnson doesn't have that popularity. So Johnson becomes president, and the radical Republicans, and the word radical means extremist, and in this case extremist means that they had a position that wanted to free not only slaves, but wanted to give them equality. That's why they were extreme, because at their time, normal people didn't want to give them equality. They wanted them free in the North, but equality was something that was far off. Radical Republicans really wanted freedom. That's why they're called radical. Today, they would probably be called normal because we believe that everybody's entitled to be equal. Back then, they were radical. Okay? So, the radical Republicans now oppose Johnson. And the opposition is fierce. But the problem with Johnson is that the radical Republicans are the ones with power. Okay? Why? Because they're from the North. The only states that are states still are northern states. The South still hasn't become states. Remember, they left the Union. They're not states. So the northern Republicans are the ones that are in control. And Johnson picks a fight with them. Now, just imagine this. You are in a fight with your little brother or little sister, or big brother or big sister, whatever the case may be. Okay? And as you're fighting, mom or dad comes into the equation, comes into the mess. Now, you think you're right, and mom or dad kind of tries to do this political thing. Well, what did you do to your... And then you lose it. And then you go off on them. Now, when that happens, I see a little smile over there. When that happens, mom and dad react how?
They can imagine like,
And who?
I'm older than you, you must respect
And
me.
you. Is this better for your brother and sister if you go off on your mom and dad?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They get the benefit of your reaction. Now, think about this dynamic. Think about this three-party relationship. Congress, Johnson and the Confederates, and African Americans. Johnson doesn't have a great deal of power, but as Congress is trying to do things, Johnson opposes them. Kind of like you going off on your parents. Is that going off on your parents helpful to your brother and sister?
Yes.
Do you think that going off on Congress helpful to the African Americans? Yes. Well, number one, Congress passes the Civil Rights Act, a series of laws that are intended to help African Americans. What does Johnson do? He vetoes them. Civil Rights Act are a law. Let me try to explain this. A law is very important, but the Constitution beats a law. It's the most important thing. Now, Congress passes this law. Johnson vetoes it. Congress then moves to change some of these things into an amendment, which is part of the Constitution. So, by Johnson opposing you throwing a tantrum, the 15th Amendment is passed, making African American citizens. I'm sorry, the 14th Amendment passes, making African American citizens, and the 15th Amendment, allowing them to vote, passes. So the tantrum that Johnson throws against the radical Republican ends up in the passage of the 14th and 15th Amendments. What is the lesson here? The lesson here is this. When there are dynamics where there is somebody with power, mom and dad, and you have a conflict with somebody else, it is never a good idea to oppose the party who's there, neutral, but has power over you. In this case, it was Congress. In your case, it's mom and dad. Because when you do, normal dynamics means that you're going to lose out, but you're going to benefit the other side. What would be good strategy? Encourage your brother and sister to go off on them, and then you go, yeah, you're right, mom. I'll never do it again. Bad person. Yes, you're right. Bad person. Because then mom and dad will go off on them, and you get the benefit. Okay? Same thing happens with Congress. Let's turn it around. Had Johnson said to Congress, listen, guys, I know I'm from the South, but I'm going to try to do my very best to help out the African Americans, but the Constitution is something very delicate. We should only change it in very extreme situations. Since you and I are getting along, why change the Constitution? If he had handled it that way, do you think that we would have the 14th and 15th Amendment?
No.
No, because it's all reaction. It's all reaction to the behavior. The dynamics created the reaction. So, to answer this opinion paper, did African Americans benefit from the conflict between Johnson and Congress?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about dynamics and about hating your enemy, which is how we started. Lincoln was killed because his enemy hated him. And at the end, it came out to hurt him. But Lincoln is a perfect individual to look at the dynamics of what you do with somebody that doesn't agree with you. Ms. Jolliffe, 2 or 3 years ago, gave me a book for Christmas called A Team of Rivals. which is kind of an interesting thing, because when you think about team,